26/11 अटैक के बाद पाकिस्तान की सेना इंडो पाकिस्तान बॉर्डर पे तैनात थी जंग के लिए। ये एक ऐसा खुलासा है जो आज तक अभी नहीं हुआ है और ये ऐसे काफ़ी सारे खुलासे हैं जो इस किताब में पूर्व राष्ट्रीय सुरक्षा सलाहकार शिव शंकर मेनन ने करे हैं। हमारे साथ बात करने के लिए हैं मिस्टर मेनन। मिस्टर मेनन, मेरा आपसे पहला सवाल ये है कि आपने अपनी किताब में 26/11 का जिक्र करा है और आपने कहा है कि भारत ने ये डिसाइड किया था कि हम पाकिस्तान को अटैक नहीं करेंगे। इसकी थोड़ी वजह बताइए कि हमने ऐसी कौन सी वजह थी कि हमने पाकिस्तान पे ना अटैक करने का ये पॉलिसी बनाई?
Well, I think what I say is a little more nuanced. It says that at that time we decided not to respond with overt military force. But I also said that that was the right decision maybe for that time and that circumstance, and that future governments would find it very difficult to repeat that. But the reason I think it was the right decision at that time is many things. I was Foreign Secretary at the time. And, you know, we know the experience in the past. Whenever there has been something between India and Pakistan, the rest of the world's attitude is, oh, there they go again, fighting. And they allocate blame 50-50, and they say, go and settle it, do a ceasefire, stop whatever you're doing. They don't actually look at the issue. And the real issue here was an attack from Pakistan by terrorists who had been assisted and aided by elements of the Pakistan establishment, by the ISI Pakistan Army. So we didn't want to allow the focus to shift from that. We wanted the world to concentrate on that, rather than saying, no, no, stop fighting and, you know, getting into equal allocations of blame. Secondly, that is exactly what the people who did the attack wanted. They wanted us to respond with force. The Pakistan Army's own position within Pakistan was much weaker at that time, after Musharraf's last few years. They wanted an Indian attack so they could unite the country around themselves and claim to be the guardians of Pakistan. There was a new civilian government in Pakistan under President Zardari, which had already shown signs of wanting to improve relations with India. And clearly the terrorists, the jihadi tanzeems and so on who were involved in this Lashkar, they didn't want that to happen. They didn't want better India-Pakistan. So there were many reasons. Also, this way we were free to pursue all the ways we could to try and bring as much pressure as possible to bring the perpetrators to justice.
पर देखा जाए आज की तारीख में देखा जाए तो क्या ये डिसीजन सही थी? क्योंकि सिर्फ आप ही नहीं, M.K. नारायणन और प्रणब मुखर्जी जैसे लोग भी थे और आर्मी भी थी जो चाहती थी कि हम अटैक करें.
I think it was the right decision for that time, in that particular context, in that international context, because we did manage, therefore, to generate enough pressure that Pakistan took some actions. But certainly we didn't get everything that we wanted. Perpetrators are still loose. The case still hasn't been finished in Pakistan.
डोनाल्ड ट्रंप यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स के अब नए प्रेसिडेंट बने हैं और उनका कहना है कि पाकिस्तान एक टेरर स्टेट है। बल्कि दो यूएस लॉ मेकर्स ने एक लेजिस्लेशन भी लाने की बात कर रहे हैं जिसमें दे आर ट्राइंग टू डिक्लेयर पाकिस्तान अ टेरर स्टेट। आपको लगता है जो ट्रंप बोल रहे हैं आने वाले दिनों में हम पाकिस्तान को टेरर स्टेट डिक्लेयर कर सकते हैं, कम से कम यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स, और जो इतनी सारी फंड्स वो जो यूएस जो पाकिस्तान को देता है शायद उसमें कहीं पे कोई रोक हो?
I think we will have to see how the policy of the Trump administration evolves. You know, a lot of it was campaign rhetoric. Some of it might have been his personal opinion. But I think what an administration actually does after coming to power, once they have all the facts, they see, and when their function is different, it's not winning an election or expressing their own opinion, it's about serving the interests of a country. And then I think things change. So, which is why there's always a gap between what politicians say before they come to power and what they do after they are in power.
26/11 की अगर दोबारा बात करें तो ऐसा लगता है कि यूएस को काफ़ी सारा मालूम था कि डेविड कोलमैन हेडली एंड ही वाज अ स्टेट एक्टर इन द सेंस कि वो ड्रग इन्फोर्समेंट एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन का एम्प्लॉय था। तो ऐसा लगता है कि यूएस को काफ़ी कुछ मालूम था पर उन्होंने हमारे साथ वो इंटेलिजेंस शेयर नहीं किया या शायद उनके इंटरेस्ट में नहीं था ये सब बताना हमें.
Well, you know, there will always be a suspicion that the US knew more, but how much they knew, how much they actually, you know, had put together the picture themselves, it's very hard to say. And you know, this is a very difficult question for anybody to prove, that oh, he didn't know, or how do you prove something that didn't exist, that something didn't exist. The suspicion is there because David Coleman Headley worked for the DEA, was a US agent. Well, at the same time that he was working for Lashkar, he was working for the ISI, he worked for multiple.
David Coleman Headley की wife ने इस्लामाबाद में US embassy में ये आपकी किताब
She had gone in and
yes,
she had reported. In fact, thrice he had been reported.
और उसने ये भी बोला था कि वो आतंकवादी है.
Yes, that he's terrorist, that he's doing work like this. So there will always be a suspicion. There are New York Times stories, and I think there are footnotes in my book which refer to them, also saying this. But to my mind, the problem really in all these is many people have small bits of information, but unless you can put it all together and actually analyze it, you don't get the full picture. So, but you will never know how much they knew at that time and how much.
आप फॉरेन सेक्रेटरी थे और लेटर ऑन NSA भी थे. आपने कभी इस बात का जिक्र किया कि शायद US को ज़्यादा मालूम था और उन्होंने बताया नहीं? हमने कभी उनकी तरफ एक उंगली उठाई?
I'll tell you frankly, if we go and you ask somebody, did you know more? Is he going to tell you yes? You can't. That's not a reasonable expectation.
ऐसे में आपको लगता है कि इंडिया ने जो अभी सर्जिकल स्ट्राइक्स करी हैं उसका कोई फ़ायदा है?
And frankly, I don't think surgical strike is the right word. I mean, this was really preemptive action against terrorists in their launching pads on the other side of the LOC.
And the DGMO said it was along the LOC.
Along the LOC. And I think that sort of action in the past has always been covert, quiet. We haven't publicized it. And the aim was to limit infiltration and to restore some level of peace along the line. Once you do it publicly, it becomes harder. It's useful because it does show there are costs for that kind of behavior which is unacceptable. But it's not going to solve the problem. It's not going to change the nature. Well, if you do it publicly. Because then public expectation on both sides is aroused. Both sides have to react to what the other is saying and doing. And so it becomes an escalatory cycle. But what it does, it's useful to the limited extent that it can buy you smaller periods of peace and raise the costs for him of what he's doing. It will not change his mind. It won't change the jihadi tanzeems. And frankly, hitting a couple of tin sheds here or there is not going to change the nature. And the sponsors, the state sponsors of that terrorism, their incentives to do so actually continue. And if you go public, you increase their incentive.
डिफेंस मिनिस्टर मनोहर पारिकर ने एक बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग बात बोली. उन्होंने बोला कि अगर ज़रूरत पड़े तो हम न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स भी यूज़ कर सकते हैं पाकिस्तान के ख़िलाफ़ या किसी भी देश के ख़िलाफ़. और ये हमारी जो पॉलिसी है नो फर्स्ट यूज़ की, इससे बिल्कुल ख़िलाफ़ है. आपको लगता है कि ये
खिलाफ तो नहीं है? He said his personal view.
आपको लगता है डिफेंस मिनिस्टर्स को अपनी पर्सनल व्यूज़ ऐसे देनी चाहिए?
It's up to him. He's chosen to. I think it confuses the issue. Both for our own people, and I'm not sure that just an expression of views is the right way to discuss it. I do believe that nuclear doctrine, it's clear, it's agreed, it's decided by the government, it's reiterated. I do believe that it needs to be reviewed. I don't say that it's fixed for all time, because circumstances change, different things change. But yes, it's true. But every review so far has said that the basics of this, no first use, that we won't be the first to use nuclear weapons, but that if nuclear weapons are used against us, we will retaliate massively, and that therefore we will maintain a second strike capability, that we will have a triad, land, sea, air, and so on. Those elements have always been reconfirmed. I think the way to do, there's no harm, I think, in having an academic discussion, government internally reviewing it, but I don't think we should communicate or confuse the nature of the doctrine. And the defense minister, the prime minister, people like that speak for government. No matter what it is, you know, they might think it's their personal opinion, but they do represent government at the highest levels. So what they say, I think, has to be...
इसमें आनी नहीं चाहिए?
I don't think, not in public. I don't think, because you need a level of strategic certainty if you want deterrence to work. He must know how you will behave, and the reason you've constructed your doctrine is to prevent other people from thinking that they can use their nuclear weapons to change your behavior, to threaten you, and so on.
हमारा सोचना ये है कि शायद ये उनका पर्सनल व्यू था, बट सरकार में और बीजेपी पार्टी में लोगों का ऐसा मानना है कि ये शायद पर्सनल व्यू नहीं था और ये शायद आरएसएस का व्यू है। तो ऐसा लगता है कि सरकार में और पार्टी में मतभेद है।
You know, it's normal for there to be several opinions within any government party, whatever organization. I take that for granted. But I think there's a certain messaging discipline that needs to be followed while you go through the discussion internally. I
और
don't
ये
see a
मैसेजिंग
problem with
डिसिप्लिन
that.
खासकर इम्पोर्टेंट है, खासकर क्योंकि उस वक्त न्यूक्लियर सप्लायर्स ग्रुप की एक मीटिंग चल रही थी वियना में।
Well, the timing was unfortunate. It's true because PM was in Japan signing a civil nuclear cooperation agreement. The NSG was about to consider India's, membership. So yes, the timing was unfortunate. But in any case, I mean, irrespective of the timing, I think there's a way of doing these things.
न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स की जहाँ पे बात आती है उसमें आपने एक बहुत ही इंटरेस्टिंग बात बोली है। आपने कहा है कि डर टेररिस्ट ऑर्गेनाइजेशन से इतना नहीं है, नॉन स्टेट एक्टर्स से, जितना डर है कि शायद कोई पायलट या कोई ब्रिगेडियर पाकिस्तानी आर्मी का यूज़ कर सकता है ये न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स। और ख़ासकर आज की तारीख में जो पाकिस्तानी आर्मी है वो काफ़ी ज़्यादा रिलीजियस है, लेस प्रोफेशनल है, और जो थ्रेशोल्ड है फॉर यूसेज ऑफ न्यूक्लियर डिवाइसेस वो काफ़ी लो हो गया है।
I think the problem is that if, as Pakistan has announced, that she wants to make tactical nuclear weapons. These are battlefield weapons for actual use in battles, which means that control of those weapons then goes down the line in the hands of brigadiers, colonels maybe, I don't know. So that makes it more risky because you're in effect dispersing this weapon to many more people at much lower levels. So there is a real risk then of an insider threat, of somebody within the organization, not so much an outsider getting his hands on it as even an insider threat. And I think that is what has become much more serious.
ऐसा कभी डिस्कशन जब आप NSA थे इसके ऊपर कभी डिस्कशन हुआ सरकार में?
Well, many of the times that we reviewed no first use and reviewed the policy and so on, certainly whatever happens, whether it's Pakistan trying to develop tactical nuclear weapons or other developments in the security scenario, we'd look at all those and see how they affect the doctrine and the possible.
तो अगर हमें लगता है कि शायद कोई ब्रिगेडियर या कोई लो रैंकिंग ऑफिसर ऐसा अटैक कर सकता है, तो इज़न्ट इट अ गुड आइडिया, जैसे पारेकर साहब कह रहे हैं कि नो फर्स्ट यूज़ पॉलिसी को हमें रिव्यू करना चाहिए?
You know, if you both say you will use it first, what have you achieved? Already there is a higher risk of use. Now if both of you say you will use first, then both of you are then incentivized to actually be the first to use it. That's surely a very unstable situation. That's a much less stable situation than a situation where you are deterring the use by threatening to use your weapons, rather than saying, I will use it first, then he has an interest then in using it before you, your interest isn't going even. So you're actually making it even more likely that one side or the other will go first.
यानी कि कल की तारीख में अगर कोई टेरर अटैक होता है, बहुत बार इंडिया में ये बोला जाता है कि न्यूक्लियर वेपन से उनको चुप करा देना चाहिए पाकिस्तान को, बट आप कहते हैं अपनी किताब में,
We have never regarded it nuclear weapons as the answer to terrorism. Terrorism has to be fought as terrorism, just as conventional wars have to be fought as conventional wars. I don't think you can use a nuclear weapon to deal with terrorists. I mean, that's just not. It's very hard to think of a credible scenario where India would need to use nuclear weapons first. That's the problem.
अगर हम चाइना की बात करें, पाकिस्तान की और चाइना की जो दूरियां हैं वो बहुत कम होती जा रही हैं, और इतने सालों में चाइना और पाकिस्तान की न्यूक्लियर पॉलिसी हमेशा एक दूसरे को सपोर्ट करती आई है। आपको क्या लगता है कि कल को अगर चाइना के साथ हमारे रिश्ते ख़राब होते हैं तो चाइना कैन बी द फर्स्ट टू यूज़ दीज न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स अगेंस्ट इंडिया?
China has a no first use doctrine, and in fact Chinese nuclear doctrine is actually quite similar to ours. They have always said they won't be. They actually considered developing tactical nuclear weapons like Pakistan is trying to do in the late 80s, early 90s. But they then abandoned it.
So
they decided that it wasn't a good idea. So China, at least, their declared policy is that they will not use nuclear weapons first.
तो डर हमें पाकिस्तान से ज़्यादा है ना कि चाइना से?
No, because Pakistan has an offensive doctrine, one, of first use. Secondly, it's the only nuclear weapons program in the world which is under purely military control. There's no civilian control, there's no dual control. And also because they regard it as really a war-fighting weapon.
इंडिया पाकिस्तान टाइज़ को नॉर्मल करने के लिए अगर हम कश्मीर इशू को सेटल करते हैं, आपको लगता है कि हमारी टाइज़ नॉर्मल हो जाएंगी?
I mean, the Pakistanis like to say this, that Kashmir is a core issue, you must settle Kashmir, then everything will be all right. I am much less sanguine. About anybody's capacity to solve it, their domestic politics ability to bear a real solution and implement one. Also about the fact that, you know, it's a choice about the kind of relationship that you want. And if you look at continuously in the past, whenever we've come close to settling these various issues, we found it very difficult to.
तो अगर हम कश्मीर को सेटल कर लेते हैं, फिर क्या बचेगा लड़ाई करने के लिए पाकिस्तान आर्मी के लिए?
I think the problem, that is one reason why we've never actually settled Kashmir. We've come close, we've discussed it, but we haven't actually settled it. One reason is because there are very strong institutional interests and domestic political interests in Pakistan, which have an interest in at least a controlled level of hostility, a managed level of hostility between India and Pakistan.
आप पाकिस्तान आर्मी की बात कर रहे हैं?
Pakistan Army is only one of it, one part of that. And there are other reasons. There are other reasons also.
एक मुद्दा जो आपने अपनी किताब में जिक्र नहीं किया है वो है टेरर फाइनेंसिंग का, चाहे वो लश्कर हो या जैश हो, और ये मुद्दा जुड़ा हुआ है डीमोनेटाइजेशन से। प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी का कहना है कि डीमोनेटाइजेशन, और आज वो काफ़ी भावुक थे पार्लियामेंट में, उन्होंने कहा डीमोनेटाइजेशन की एक वजह ये है कि हम टेरर फाइनेंसिंग को रोकना चाहते हैं, जो FICN आ रही है उसे रोकना चाहते हैं, एंड ऑफ कोर्स ब्लैक मनी को भी हम कंट्रोल करना चाहते हैं। आपको लगता है कि इसमें कुछ तथ्य है?
You know, terrorists will use any money. You demonetize, produce new notes, they will try and make new notes also. And I believe 2 terrorists were killed in Bandipur yesterday, I think it was, last night. They were found with new 2,000 rupee notes on them. But terrorism is cheap. You have to remember that the actual investment by the sponsors is not that much in the terrorists. And if they can get away with using counterfeit notes, they will. If they can't, they'll use genuine notes. And especially state-sponsored terrorism is not going to be deterred by demonetization. I mean, it's a matter of time then. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't make the effort. You need to try and stop all their sources of funding and see what you can do about it. And that's something that it's an effort is worth making.
But ये जो effort है
But
इसका
it's not going to stop terrorism.
फेक इंडियन करेंसी हमें रोकनी चाहिए, बट इससे आतंकवाद से कुछ
No, it might be a temporary hiccup for them, but it's not something that they cannot overcome.
मतलब ये नोट्स फिर से जाली नोट्स वो बना सकते हैं आसानी से?
I think they will.
और मेरे ख्याल में जो कराची में और जगह उनकी प्रिंटिंग प्रेसेस हैं, सरकार की जो प्रिंटिंग प्रेसेस हैं, उसमें ये नोट्स छपते हैं?
Well, so we believed certainly in the past. But now, I mean, for the last 2.5 years, I'm not really sure where they're doing it, what they're doing.
आपने एक अपनी किताब में बहुत एक इंटरेस्टिंग बात बोली है, and I'm going to be quoting from the book. The current NDA government is open to the charge of strategic incoherence, of having a vision deficit, and of forwarding a policy without a conceptual framework. इतने strong words.
There's no one place where they've said what their goal for Indian foreign policy, foreign and security policy is. I'm not sure why. In previous governments it was quite clear. Our goal was to transform India. So our primary focus was domestic, was the domestic transformation of India. And to create an enabling external environment for that, which means a peaceful periphery, which means, the larger economic issues and so on. Now, there is some advantage in not having a clear stated vision and strategy, because it leaves you free to respond pragmatically to everything that happens. And the world is changing very quickly.
पर प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी इतने सारे देश गए हैं, इतनी सारी बातें करते हैं.
That's a different thing from having a strategic vision for where you want to be and how you want to go about it. But it's true, he's very active, very energetic in projecting, himself and foreign policy, and therefore, since he's the Prime Minister of India, India as well, But that's a different thing from a strategic vision and a clear, articulated vision.
Mr. Menon, thank you so much for speaking with News
Thank
Nation.
you. Thank you very much.